Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into the ProspeX Podcast. I'm your host, John Garcia Jr., and as always, joined by Cliff Hill, the CEO of ProspeX. Cliff, every time we talk, there's a new big job open or multiple big college football jobs open. None of them have been filled yet. The candidates are being thrown out every single day from a skepticism and political standpoint even. So let's focus on the last two jobs that have opened. Just want quick reaction, your sort of initial thoughts on the Auburn Tigers job reopening and another Tiger in the SEC, LSU and Brian Kelly parting ways.
Yeah, the Auburn job is kind of a little unfair. And here's why I say that because I've watched multiple games and I'm not a coach, so I can say this and not get fined. But the officiating this year has been questionable. And there's a couple games that Auburn lost that you could attribute to officiating. So we don't know what goes on behind the scene with Coach Hugh Freeze there. But, you know, I feel like one thing that's happening is people want a quicker return on their investment. So the window to win has become much smaller. So that is working unfair against these coaches this year. Like we've never seen anything like this ever. And when we first started talking about this, I mentioned roster retention and things like that, and it can't help with that. And I will say this too, with all these jobs being open, one thing that it's really been impactful for are these kids are kind of in limbo because they don't know what's going to happen when the next coach comes in. There's a lot of kids that are really good players that at this point in the season spots have filled up, and this kind of, you've got what now, 7 jobs or something open, so that kind of pushes a lot of other kids back out into visits and different stuff that's going on. So these other kids that are waiting don't know what to do. The kids at the schools don't know what to do because they have a relationship with their position coach that recruited them, and now, in all likelihood, that position coach is going to be gone. So, my advice is always to these kids those things are important, your relationships with your coaches and things like that, but pick a school you'd want to go to as just a regular student. And I think you kind of see that in this. There's so much uncertainty. And I hope this is not a preview of how college football is going to become.
Yeah, that's a great point because it's been volatile. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. You talk about the brands that have the head job available, just at the very top, the Florida
Yes.
Gators, the Penn State Nittany Lions, LSU, which I mean, at one point or another, you could argue is a top two, three job maybe in the country. I mean, there's other
Yeah.
SEC jobs open. You still got Virginia Tech, Oklahoma State, UCLA. I mean, there's so many instances where you could just see a short leash with the coaching staff and the fallout. But what's crazy about it is, as you mentioned, we haven't seen a lot of quote unquote expected to hit the portal conversations or news reports or anything like that just yet. Everyone is in wait and see mode relative to the month of December and January when we start to get actual answers on some of these vacancies and how they're going to be filled. So I think that's another difference now versus even 2-3 years ago, where you would see a coach fired and the next day 10 guys reportedly
Yeah.
will be ready to jump in that portal. Kids are decommitting, all of those things. All of those processes on the recruiting and portal front seem to be a little bit slowed down. So I think that's another sign of the times and how quickly things have changed, how volatile this coaching carousel has become. And obviously, it's not done. There are several other jobs that could come open here over the next few weeks. We're 3 weeks away from rivalry weekend. So a lot can and will change here in the foreseeable future. But I go back to LSU, Cliff. That job, when Brian Kelly took it, he viewed it as, I've gotten so close at Notre Dame, so very close to the mountaintop. He went to the national title game against Alabama. Every other accolade he could provide at a school without a championship, he did. And he saw LSU as sort of one step higher than Notre Dame, which some people will get mad at, but that was the truth. That was the catalyst for that move. He thought it was true in terms of roster building, roster management, and level of competition. Ironically, that is what has sort of pushed him out at LSU in very short order. That job, does it to you become the number one job available? I know there's a difference between the football side of it and the human side of it where you have to deal with the expectations. Obviously, Penn State, LSU have higher expectations than just about everyone else on the list. But does this become the no-brainer top job available and every other school is almost waiting to see what LSU does? How do you view the prestige of that LSU gig?
So the prestige part, yeah, I think it probably is. They've been the most recent national champion. So they have a good NIL program set up. So for those reasons, but I think it goes even beyond that. I think you kind of look at, well, what is your connection to the state and the area? Some people could argue, if you're a northern guy, maybe the Penn State job is best. Or if you want to get in on that Florida recruiting, and I know LSU and everybody else obviously recruits Florida, but you and I live in Florida. There's a reason for that. So if a coach has a connection to Florida, then that could sway it a little bit. And I think when you're talking, you made a good point about the dominoes falling. I think there's one key domino, and that is, what is Lane Kiffin going to do? And I think once he makes his decision, you'll see things start lining up relatively quickly. And I had myself pretty convinced that he was going to take the Florida job. I still think that is viable for sure, but really with LSU opening up, it kind of puts him in a great position to renegotiate his contract, stay where he is, and not have that pressure on him to go win a national championship. So, but overall scheme of things, I would give the edge to LSU. But I also think when it comes to jobs being open, Florida is right there too. I think that one knock maybe against Florida is their last three hires have not panned out. And there's a lot of pressure for the next guy to come in and win pretty quickly. But yeah, I agree with you that I would give the edge to LSU.
Yeah, the three coaches before Brian Kelly each, of course, won a national title at LSU. So, yeah, very easy to sell that ceiling relative to the others. And crazy to say out loud, at Florida, almost 20 years since that last national championship. Either we're getting old or time is flying, or maybe both
I
at
think
this
it may be
stage.
both. And I'll make a point. So I had two really, really good guys on an LSU visit, two of the top guys in the country. And it was the only visit the whole year we didn't meet and hang out with the head coach, which kind of, when we left there, it was almost like, well, I don't know. So I don't know if there was other things involved with the decision or not. But back to what we were talking about, the more I think about it, I would give LSU the edge unless a coach has a link somehow to the state of Florida.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's keep it in Florida. Let's keep it in the SEC, right? Looking at current events, a lot going on in recruiting. Again, the portal's about to open up like crazy. These jobs are open. The college football playoff rankings finally came out. A lot of SEC flavor, of course, there at the top behind, number one, Ohio State. Let's go to Oklahoma. I want to kind of circle back to Jacob Curry, obviously a prospect you and I know very, very well. We talk a lot about recruiting in this scope of 5 stars and first year impact guys and known names for 2-3 years. But every single fall, senior season evals come up, and there are guys who just play their way up, guys who
Yep.
just force your hand and say, hey, I'm this good and I'm showing you every single Friday night. So now you level up as a recruit. And that's what Curry did over the last year. Now he's committed to Oklahoma just a few weeks ago, over Ohio State, Florida State, and some others. Again, Cliff, you've known him incredibly well and long. What is Jacob like as a person, and why has his star risen so quickly as a player as we roll a few clips on his senior season?
So Jacob comes out of a military family. And so he is all business and he is on point all the time. And he's a great kid. He's a quieter kid. He just wants to do his job, and he has great parents, so they're all dialed in. But sometimes these kids, they don't know to do things like certain camps and different things to get their name out there. So, like you said, Jacob was a guy that has played his way up, and if you watch him on these films we're looking at, he has tremendous speed. And once the right people found out what his speed was and they really got to evaluate him and see him in person, they were sold. Like it was the same week or a week apart. He like got Oklahoma and Ohio State and all these big guys coming in. And I think what sold him was Oklahoma really had a plan for him and how they were going to use him specifically to their defense. But he's a great player, and his, like I said, his speed is fantastic. He plays safety and linebacker, and um, you know, and his lateral movement is fantastic too. And he's a smart kid. Like he's a great get, and he's going to be a team player.
Yeah, kid who also tests incredibly well. I believe he won linebacker MVP at an Under Armour event this past offseason. And that was really the question initially for me in scouting Jacob was, what is he? You know, he's 6'1", 6'2", over 200 pounds, but he moves so well. So do you just say, hey, he's going to carry more weight and be a full-time linebacker? Or do you leave him as this sort of outside backer safety hybrid who can do everything, right? Because with most recruits at linebacker, you're wondering what is that third down trait? Either you can rush the passer or you can cover. Well, in this case, Curry can do both, as you see with these clips, and the stats back that up. Double-digit sacks this year. I think he had 8 as a junior. 20 plus tackles for loss, 100 plus total tackles. He is sideline to sideline, but he can also drop into coverage. So it's almost a pick your poison with Curry. So I think the more you can do, and this is true probably in every industry, the more you can do for the organization or the business or whatever it is, the more value you carry with your name, because you can be a little bit more in the football sense, a little bit more, scheme versatile. You're not dependent on, having a down lineman in front of you or playing in the box. You can flex out in space. You could even play 10 yards off the ball in certain instances. You can run with a tight end, flex with a running back, whatever it is, but you could also come downhill and play the run or rush the passer. So I think the more you can do in any industry, and defense in high school football is a great indicator of value. Can you still dominate no matter what you're doing? And Curry is showing a lot of that as a senior. He just won, I think, 6A Player of the Year again up in Northeast Florida. So a guy who's really come on the scene over the last couple of years, as you mentioned, military family, and you watch him, he plays with that discipline, right? The angles are good. The eye discipline is great. He's never sort of faked out in the wrong space or out of his responsibility, plays within that, but obviously flashes a lot in between. So a really nice get for Oklahoma. And he's, again, kind of the antithesis of the star power that comes with a lot of these kids as recruits, right? Some of them are committing, 2 years after they burst onto the scene as a national name, as opposed to Curry, who was committed to Northwestern as a sleeper, under the radar get. And it shows you that side of it too, right? It's hard to stay a sleeper if you are one, right? Because your star can shine, all the way through the end of your senior season, and it's enough for another program to jump in on. And that's independent of the carousel, which often creates that in and of itself, extra opportunities for guys who are either late bloomers or labeled as late bloomers. But as you can see, Curry can attack from 3 levels. He can cover ground in a hurry, and he can finish, which is
Yeah,
something that we
he
don't
has a
talk about.
great skill set. And if you watch, like he can drop into coverage and do great. He makes great open field tackles. And when he rushes the passer, he does really good about not getting his feet narrow. So when they cut and move, he still makes the tackle. So he's got a lot of natural abilities that when he gets into like the Oklahoma system and gets really, really good coaching, like I think they have very high expectations for him.
Yeah, sort of easy to root for a guy like that. So late congrats again to Jacob Curry and the Oklahoma Sooners for partnering up here at the end of the 2025 season. Let's stop with all the SEC love here. We don't want to be labeled as an SEC show. Let's shift over to the ACC. Cliff, you've been on the road again. I think we could probably say that before and after every show. But you got to take in a little bit of an extended visit to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, in the thick of Tobacco Road, or ACC country, and watching from a very close standpoint Bill Belichick operate. You were down there with some recruits for a visit. Shout out to North Carolina, big recruiting win for them with DQ Forkba recently as well. But in terms of that program, Cliff, so many questions around Bill Belichick, his true purpose, his plan, all of those things. And obviously we don't have all of the answers, but when you spend as much time with someone like you did, you start to get a pretty strong foundation of what they at least want to do. So I'm going to step back, Cliff, and let you have the podium here. What was it like with future Hall of Famer Bill Belichick at North Carolina?
So I got to spend a whole lot of time with him this last visit, most part of 2 full days between him and Michael Lombardi. And we broke down the film from the day and he explained the defense. Now it's the second time I've had the opportunity for him to explain his defense to me, which is fantastic because he's probably the best defensive coach ever. So I understand it now, and I understood how DQ's skill set would fit within his defensive scheme. So that was a great fit. So we were there in his office till late that night. I think I left the facilities building at about 11 o'clock. I got back the next day at 8 a.m. and he was there. And he was doing everything he should be doing. And I did have the conversation with him just because it was in the media and it wasn't, he is a great guy, first off. He's very honest. And I asked him like what the plans were. There was nothing that was said that made me hesitant that he was going to leave. Number one. Number two, and more importantly, there was nothing I saw that indicated that. They are working their hind ends off there. And so if you understand what they're trying to do, so I took the time to read their books. And the first thing that they believe in when they get to a place is installing their organization. They want to get that in place and then bring the players in because you have to have it set up to where when you bring the players in that, you know, they're going to prosper and excel. And so that's what they're trying to get set up. And it may look like to most fans that they're not doing well. Well, each week you can see they're getting better and better because these guys are picking up the scheme and everything like that. And when they got there, they didn't have a defensive lineman. Like they got a brand new fresh team. So I think they brought in like 70 guys. It was a lot. So they have to, and like everyone's top speed is a mile per hour faster than it was in the spring. Everyone has gone up a great deal on their strength. Their body fat composition has gone down. So they're getting everything in place. And with this recruiting class that they're bringing in and everyone understanding their schemes and everything on how they run their defense and their offense, you're starting to see that. At the beginning of the year, they had some bad losses. And then against Cal, they should have won that game. Against Virginia, they should have won that game by 2 touchdowns. They, I think, turned the ball over maybe 4 times inside the 10-yard line. And then they go up to Syracuse and they win, and they won by a couple touchdowns. So you can see that progression in place, but being there with him in person, having conversation with him for hours, there's nothing that makes me think that man is going to leave. That's not how he wants his legacy to go out. I promise you that. So I think he's trying to do his very best job possible to get the North Carolina program to where he wants them to be, the fans want them to be. And I'm going to stop there, but I'm just going to say everyone is committed to this process there. And I think you're going to see some things soon that's going to back up what I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, when you hear process and Belichick, you think of Saban, and hey, it takes time. Remember, 5-7 that first year for him at Alabama. Right now, Bill Belichick 3-5. But as you mentioned, Cliff, the last few weeks things are starting to pull together, particularly on defense. Over the last month, only allowing 16 points per game, as you mentioned, had multiple wins right there on the cusp, including what would have been a top 20 win over the Virginia Cavaliers, and then they did get the win over the Syracuse Orange. So things are trending in the right direction for UNC, and now they're coming off of a bye week, so we'll see how they figure going forward with the back half of their schedule and bowl eligibility potentially around the corner. That would be huge for a program like that, but they're still recruiting at a strong clip. So I don't think your reaction, your insight is singular. I think other folks are seeing something in that same vein. Other mentors, whether it's high school coaches, trainers, parents, and obviously the prospects themselves that are jumping on board with this program and continuing to visit Chapel Hill later in the cycle. There is a true belief there. And I think you're seeing it on the field, but more importantly, you're seeing it in the building. This is not appearing to be a one off or a, hey, let's just get some wins together so I can throw the keys at my son. This is something that has some sustainability. And I think that is a big deal in college football, again, especially with all of the volatility elsewhere.
Well, and a couple things. The only way it works, even if his plan is down the road to hand it off to his son, the only way that plan works is if you're winning. If you're losing, that doesn't work. So I think he's going to be there for multiple more years. Last year, I did an interview, or beginning of this year, with the Denver media group, and that's when Prime was, it was all said. He's going to the Cowboys. He's going here. He's going there. And I'd had a conversation with him that made me think he was going to stay there. And my prediction on that show was that he was going to be there. And then within the week, he signed his contract extension. So I think sometimes when you're there in the building with them, like when you have these long conversations with guys, you really start to see what they're trying to do and what their goals are and how everything is working. And I feel very comfortable that he's not going anywhere. I feel that. And I will also say, because you brought up Saban's name, if you look at that Saban tree of coaches and what he's been able to produce, you could argue that Belichick may be at the top of that tree. They're running the same defense. They've coached together all the way back to the early 90s. Nick Saban left his head coaching job at Toledo to go be the defensive coordinator with Belichick. This defense that they've got and that they've developed together, that's one of the ways that Alabama was so good for so long. And if he gets this in, and he will get it in, at North Carolina and everybody understands your defense, then they could be very, very good. He's not forgotten how to coach. I'll tell you that. Like the man gets up and will do swim moves and, show you what he's talking about. He wants you to understand his scheme. And there's nothing, not one thing I saw that he wasn't just as involved or more involved than anybody I've gotten to spend time with and break down film and do all those things with.
Fascinating stuff at the University of North Carolina. Again, back half of their schedule, winnable games. I think Stanford is up next. Very winnable games for that program. So we'll see if they can claw their way to a bowl game, and then you get the extra practices, and then you're off and running relative to establishing that culture. So that'll be fascinating. Subscript with the rest of college football season still to be played.
And one last point I will say, just like the team is figuring it, just like they're figuring out college football on the field. There is a learning curve to how NIL works. And they are also doing a very good job about doing anything that they can to figure out that process. So the whole organization has been moving forward, not backwards. And I will say, even with some of the negative media and different stuff like that, when you're talking about Michael Lombardi and Bill Belichick, they're not going to flinch under pressure. That's not how those men operate. And that's why I say it is all going to work out.
Yeah, trying to figure out NIL from any school at this point is a mission because it continues to change in and of
Correct.
itself as the sport goes along. So yeah, that even just that part of it is something that could tell you a little bit about just how planted on the ground their feet are there in Chapel Hill. So will be fascinating to follow for sure, and that means they're going to recruit really well, right? A lot to be said in the class of 26 and beyond. And I think that's a good segue, Cliff, to our recruiting tip of the day. Right now is a busy time. A lot of flying bullets, as they say, head on a swivel. Everyone's trying to secure their guys, maybe start to look ahead. These new coaching staffs will then circle back on guys who either slip through the cracks or might still be available later in the cycle. I think one of the first steps of the process from the college standpoint is identification, right? We're identifying players who might fit what we do. And that seems pretty obvious, right? Yeah, you got to figure out who the guys are before you can go out and recruit them. Well, on the other side of that, as a recruit, you have to be identifiable. And that's not just height, weight, position, all of that. It's the actual definition of identifiable. How can we find you? How can we start to get in contact with you? It sounds crazy coming out of my mouth, but as a journalist, as a scout, being in this for 15 years, we have a hard time finding guys on social
Yeah.
media. We have a hard time finding the huddle tape sometimes. And look, we're all human at the end of the day. That frustration can allow you to move on to someone who's a little easier to find in certain situations. For us, recruiting tip of the day today is social media bios, whether it's your at name, your handle, whatever we want to call it. Make them easy, make them simple.
Yes.
My name is John Garcia and my handle is John Garcia _JR, only because there's 1,000 John Garcias out there. So I had to do a little something at the end, but you could still find it, right? So whatever your name is, don't put a nickname. Keep it simple. Put your name or something very, very close to your name so that we can find you. Because if we have a hard time finding you, imagine these staffs trying to go through hundreds and sometimes thousands of players when they're establishing their board or trying to execute to recruit off of that board. If they can't find you, you're just one more step behind the next guy. So help yourself and be easily identifiable on social media. It will work wonders for folks trying to find you or for those trying to do a little bit more research on you, which is inevitable if you're going to be a scholarship level player at any level.
And to expand on your point, I would tell guys to put a picture in there of them without their helmet on. I know everybody likes to have these in action pictures and some just use random pictures. But if you've got a picture where I can see, oh, there you are in your IMG uniform and I see your face, I know that's you because like you said with your name, John Garcia, a lot of these players have the same name as other people. And then now I've got to try to figure out, was this him? Is this him? But if you've got your picture there and I can see your number, the team, and your face, I know that's you. So, and these coaches absolutely use Twitter as a tool. Instagram is more for your branding and NIL deals, but Twitter is how these coaches are finding these guys and communicating. So, I guess I'm going to add a second point. So we're giving 2 points today. But your social media following is what's going to get you deals. Like, I think there's this false idea that just because you're going to play football, you're going to just, these deals are going to come. They don't come. Like, if you're a quarterback or a skill position, maybe that's true. But if you're a defensive lineman, a linebacker, an offensive lineman, anything else, they're going to look at your social media following. I've had so many conversations with brands. I had one today with brands, and I tell them about a guy and they move past. Then I told him how many Instagram followers he had, and boom, got a deal done. So your number of followers, your clear name that's out there, and a good picture can go a long way in trying to get where you want to go on multiple fronts.
Social media is the resume, ladies and gentlemen. So make sure it's tightened up. If you're a recruit listening, watching, or you know a recruit, make sure that it is very easy to identify them. And like you said, could have some monetary value as well. Excellent advice as usual from the one and only Cliff Hill. I'm John Garcia Jr., your host of the ProspeX Podcast, and that's a perfect way to button it up. So until next time, we'll see you around the corner.